Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with veteran Detroit jazz trombonist, the cool John Tbone Paxton. We caught up with him on April 2nd, 2020 to talk about this new, strange COVID-19 world and his new 2020 CD, Tbone Paxton and the RJ Spangler Quartet, back in your own backyard. He's got great stories from his musical life and very distinct hopes for the future. Dig it.
Where are you at in the world?
Yeah, I live in Detroit, Michigan.
Okay, cool. So how's the Motor City holding up?
Oh man, the CDC and they're calling for Detroit to be the next hot spot after New York.
But do you think that's going to be the case?
Well, how would I know?
Yeah, true.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know. I hope not. I lived in Detroit 44 years, but I remarried, and when I remarried, I moved 4 miles north of 8 Mile. The Eminem, the movie 8 Mile.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the dividing line between Detroit and the suburbs, and Wayne County and the suburbs. So I moved up to Royal Oak, Michigan, which is just 4 miles north of the city.
I love Royal Oak, man. I spent some time up there back in the late 90s, and that was such a hip, cool community up there.
Oh, well, you're familiar with the area.
Yeah.
Were you living here for a minute, or you were just visiting?
I was just visiting, but it was just such a cool area, and that was kind of, all these cities have their little hip areas, and that was a very cool area up there. I had a great time.
Yeah, Royal Oak was great, especially in the late 90s. There was still quite a music scene going on. The Fifth Avenue was still hanging in there, and you could see some good live acts.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of changed now. It's kind of, gentrifying, double gentrifying to being like, a little Birmingham South,
Gotcha.
So as it usually happens, the soul gets wringed out of, it's squeezed out of every place, whether it's New Orleans or, Kansas City or New York City, pick one, San Francisco, little towns, they just slowly get squeezed out, man. People miss out on what the true beauty in life is that honesty and soulfulness,
Yeah, and that's the weird thing about age is, when you're young, you don't think about things like that. But as the decades roll by, you start seeing how things go away, new things come in, the soul gets squeezed out. I guess that's the thing about being around for a long time. Unfortunately, you see that happen, but it seems like things can replace it.
They do. It's the cycle. It just starts up in other places because creative energy never stops. Creative energy never stops. It's just going to get replaced and displaced and start over again. It's just the nature of creative energy and creative people.
Without a doubt. So, how are you holding up with this whole COVID-19 thing?
Well, personally, I have my mother-in-law lives with us, and she's 86, so our main goal is to just keep her healthy and for us to stay healthy, and that'll keep her healthy.
Yeah.
Financially, it's disaster. I'm one of the musicians that, and my career was on a steep rise, really on a successful rise. The curve of my career has been in a trajectory straight up. And that all got shut down. I had this CD release come out on Mac Avenue Records on Detroit Music Factory, and I had 4 CD release parties and performance at the Dirty Dog Jazz Cafe, which is one of the 3 finest clubs in Michigan. The 2 really, the Blue Llama and the Dirty Dog, are the best jazz clubs in Michigan, and plus they own Mac Avenue Records. So that was an important date. I lost to 3 CD release parties around the state, and we find ways to keep fighting back. I did a post on Facebook, and I've sold 40 CDs off of that post, directly through PayPal, and I'm ready to do a new post and rewrite it and send it to some more groups. I want to get it on the Jazz and Traditional page. I need to put a NOLA group together and include all of my friends in New Orleans, and they can share it with other people that would be like-minded. So I'm trying to be creative that way,
Yeah.
Because I got a garage full of CDs.
Yeah. I hear you.
And we were rising on the charts, I mean, in 2 weeks, the first week we were 155, second week we were 98. That's a significant jump. And then COVID-19 hit. And then we went to 113 and then down to 118. But then we bounced back last week up to like 111. And Mac Avenue Records is going to do a new plea to all the radio stations to not forget about the CD. That's their most recent CD they're promoting on Detroit Music Factory, and try to encourage DJs to give it a spin and try to get it out there. So they're behind me too, and it's a limited release. We only pressed 1,000, but things were going great, and everything's just stalled out. I'm trying to file. I filed for unemployment, and the state of Michigan says they're going to start supporting self-employed people like myself and the gig economy people. So we'll see how that all unfolds, man. How are you doing?
Man, it's just bizarre. This is one of those things that no one on the planet's ever gone through, and it's just, I'm with my mother-in-law too in the house. We just moved in January, and we actually live in the hometown of Pat Metheny. We're in Lee Summit. It's a suburb of Kansas City.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So, you got to do what you got to do, man. The only thing that you can do, whether it's a pandemic or it's a times of uncertainty. I mean, everything ebbs and flows in life. Is you got to survive, man. You got to find ways to get through it. If you're an artist, and I know for me, I do jazz. I'm also a visual artist. I write. There's a lot of things with my id, and even taking pictures. I've been really opening my eyes to things that people may not ever want to remember, but it's very real about our world, about how empty things are, about the signs that are up, about the way people are interacting. And I've even noticed, too, one of the silver linings is there's people that are outside all over the place, and I've always wondered for years and years why no one went outside, and now finally people are doing that, and it's wow.
I was fascinated by that yesterday, too. I saw more people walking, because I have a dog, and the dog's obviously getting a lot of exercise these days. But I noticed, man, it's just like I've never seen this many people out walking at the same time. And they were spread out like every 150, 200 feet, man, was a couple walking,
Uh-huh.
It was pretty cool. I was just like, wow.
Cool. Yeah, it's totally cool. So there's a lot of little things that are silver linings. I have a gut feeling, though, like the real serious, wealthy entertainers and musicians, this may open them up to, not do as much as they did before. Because I think if for the first time, a lot of these people are getting to stay home, they're getting to reconnect with people. I think this could be a wake-up call for a lot of people, too, technology-wise, just like with what you're saying with your music. You can buy music without it being physical. You can support people in different ways. I think this is just the beginning of a big portal that's opening up that I don't know that we know what kind of light's going to spill through.
No, we really don't. My gut feeling is that the industry is definitely going to change after this. We just don't know how and which way. And everybody that's you say you perform jazz, so we're all concerned about a contraction in the industry for opportunity to play. But there's going to be other ways to access things. And honestly, clubs are going to open up, and they need artists to play to get people in to drink. So,
yeah,
I think that it's just easy to look at the gloom and doom side of it. And we just have to have some serenity and some patience and just perseverance and move through this and see how we can manage it on the other side of it. That's my feeling.
Well, that's why I'm doing this. When this started back in mid-March, I was just like, wow. And then I thought, this is the time that musicians are going to be at home. They're going to have the latitude to be reflective and to talk about it. This should be an oasis. This should be a unique time to discuss not only your career, but this very unique time that we may never, ever live through again in our human march. And, that's just kind of my thought on it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but at any rate, thanks for taking a minute out today to talk about the album and your life and music and what's going on in the world now.
Yeah. Oh, you're welcome, man. Really, you're definitely welcome, and love to talk to you again anytime. Be really
Absolutely. Cool. We'll open the door to hopefully more discussions. But the first thing I want to ask is, back in your own backyard, you just talked about how good it was doing, the CD releases and all that. But talk to me a little bit about This is a great album. Talk to me about the construction of this from an artistic standpoint.
Well, my partner RJ Spangler, who has been an impresario and a real cultural force in Detroit for decades. He rebuilt Johnny Bassett's career, and who was won the J.C. Handy Award, and B.B. King handed him the award. Said, "Johnny, when I die, I pass the torch to you." Wow.
Yeah.
And but unfortunately, Johnny died before B.B. Alberta Adams, he rebuilt her career, and RJ and I have been making music together for 42 years, and he just said, "John, I think we got something. I know you've got something, and I think we got something here. I think you need to go back to your roots and play the music that you identified with as a child growing up," because my father was a professional musician, and my dad was born in 1916, so he was the son of the jazz age. And he was a self-taught pianist, and he had his Detroit local union card for 63 years by the time he passed. And I grew up listening to his music, and it was really pre-1945 music, because when the war ended, my father started building a family, so he was teaching in the Detroit public schools 5 days a week and gigging 5 nights a week, so he really didn't continue to deeply go into the development of bebop and stuff like that. So I was really raised up on pre-war jazz and transitional rhythm and blues, but predominantly jazz. And then, of course, we had a collection of phenomenal classical music collection and a phenomenal Broadway collection. So, and I'm the youngest of 8 kids, so all of my brothers had all the current records from the 60s and the 70s when I was growing up. So I had a lot of music coming into me at a very young age, but what really spoke to me was the jazz. So these tunes are just really reflections of every song on there. I have a life experiences attached to in one way or another.
So what specific jazz musicians were inspirational to you growing up?
Let's see, the records I played the most, the artists I played the most on my own would have been definitely the Kansas City musicians. Count Basie on Decca in the 30s. That I wore that record out. My dad had to buy me another one because I wore all 4 sides out. That was really influential. Early Nat King Cole trio, Nat in the early 40s, from jazz to transitional rhythm and blues and jive. Billie Holiday, Duke Ellington, and small group recordings like Dickie Wells and Billie Holiday and Lester Young, and of course Benny Goodman. My dad was a trained clarinetist, and he played clarinet until his teeth fell out. So I listened to Benny Goodman and Artie Shaw and Errol Garner, oh my God, and Art Tatum. See, these are like who did my dad love? Art Tatum, Errol Garner, and it's probably his biggest influence was Teddy Wilson. And Teddy Wilson connected with Benny Goodman. And beyond Benny Goodman, I love listening to the Earl Hines records we had when I was a kid. And my parents, when I was a young boy, they bought that brand new record that came out, the Smithsonian Institution Collection of Classic Jazz. And I listened to that entire collection again and again and again. So that had started to expose me into Diz and Bird and Coltrane and the avant-garde. But I really got exposed to that music and South African music and world music when I started making music with RJ Spangler and Rick Steiger in a very creative art band in Detroit called Kumba that later turned into the Sun Messengers. So, pretty diverse. I really grew up with a lot of music, and when I was a child, I was so deeply attached to it. Any spare moment, I was listening to records, and with the headphones on, without the headphones on. My parents would come back from playing bridge, and they'd walk into the house to find their 12-year-old kid playing the second act of La Boheme at like 120 dBs. This is like, whoa, this is a weird kid. I mean, music really, really moved me, and I think it was that early childhood exposure at a very, very deep level, and it's just been with me my whole life.
What was it like to grow up in Detroit? I've been through Detroit. There's so many things about Detroit that reminded me of Kansas City. There was this old, like in the late 90s when I was there was this old Motown vibe. There was just this, there was murmurings of the past melded with the present, and there was always a future that just loomed that was always good. What was it like to be up there?
Oh man, it was, well, as a little kid, I'm still just a little kid in the 60s and 70s, I mean, I was 15 in 1975. So in the 60s coming up, it was just really about my neighborhood life on the east side of Detroit, and it was a working class Detroit neighborhood. Back then, every single house in the city was filled. There were no there were very few derelict buildings except in the worst neighborhoods. Every single property was generating income tax, property tax. All the industries were providing corporate tax. So the city was very functional and working. It was a working organism. And everything I needed on the east side of within a mile, and it was gentle and it was peaceful in some ways. I was a free press paper boy. I got up at 5 a.m. and delivered free press every day of my life for 2.5 years. And it was a different time. I went to the public schools. Detroit, the larger world of Detroit was a little bit beyond my realm. I wasn't able to get into that until I became a teenager. And but early life in Detroit was just beautiful for me. It was pretty much relegated to my neighborhood on the east side, and it was also very traumatic in a lot of ways too, because I was very empathetic as a young boy. And all the information I was being fed constantly with all of the social disruption in the 60s between the Vietnam War and all of the civil rights movements and the assassinations, and that stuff moved me very much. And I consider that to be something that also fed my desire to touch people and heal people through art, through music. I'm sure of it. And then when you get into the 70s, the music scene and the culture in Detroit in the 70s was unbelievable. I mean, Detroit is one of the great breeding grounds for the musical arts in the entire world. I mean, pick a genre: jazz, blues, rock and roll, gospel, soul, R&B. I mean, pop music. We could spend a half an hour running through the names that have been world influencers in the music, and you look Blue Note, man. Look at any record on Blue Note. You're going to see 3 or 4 guys from Detroit on that session. Yeah. I mean, it's just, Detroit is really huge, man. And what powered Motown were all the jazz and transitional rhythm and blues musicians from the 50s. They're the ones that created all that sound. They took their experience and transferred that into this new idea, this new way to make a familiar and approachable rhythm and blues that could cross over.
So did you always know that you were going to become a musician, or were there other things that were on your radar?
Always knew I was going to be a musician. Yeah, my dad didn't want to hear that. My father always said, "John, music is a very good avocation. It is not a good vocation."
So when you did get those first gigs and you got on stage, did it feel natural? Was it the best feeling you could have gotten?
Absolutely. The best feeling I could have ever gotten. And I love the democratic and egalitarian experience of the ensemble and musicians working together to create a greater good. It's just the most inspiring thing in the world. And consequently, I stayed in large ensembles for most of my career until I broke out and started to do this 8 years ago, standing on my own 2 feet as a frontman, soloist, and singer.
talk to me about mentors. Who's been really big in your life that really inspired you and gave you advice that you remember to this day?
Well, obviously, clearly, my father, first and foremost. You know, he was a great influence in my life. I mean, I watched him go to work, you know, every other day of my life, go off to play music. And, but outside of that, well, I had my first next big mentor was my university choir teacher, who was one of the world's most highly regarded choral directors, and his name was Harold Langsford. And he originally began his musical and church career in Highland Park, Michigan. And my father and him wrote the professional music fraternity at Wayne University. They wrote the charter for that. They were friends. And Harold Langsford was the greatest choir conductor you could ever imagine. And in 1981, I was in the men's glee club from Wayne State University. We went off to the world's greatest choir competition and won first place in the world. 32 young men did that, and that was a very, very powerful experience doing that. And that really attached me deeply to the power of vocal music. And then one of the biggest lessons he taught me in my life was that if you are not interpreting the lyric and finding meaning in it as an actor would do, you're missing the whole thing. So ever since that day in 1979 when I heard him say that, and continue to say that for the next 3 years that I sang with him, was the most important thing is to extract and make meaningful the musical and the lyrical content, and especially if there's words, you must make them live inside you, and that's what I try to exemplify on my record, that it's honest and meaningful, and then from that point, then I can touch people. My next major mentor was two guys from Detroit, Johnny Allen, who was a master pianist and did a lot of studio work for Stax, and he wrote the string parts to the soundtrack to the movie Shaft, and he's won Grammys. And I would study with him arranging and just general mentorship. And then his old partner from Detroit, Russell Green, the great trumpet player who played in the Lunsford Band and turned down Duke Ellington 3 times. And Duke wanted him in his band and kept coming back, and Russell said no, he didn't want to go on the road. And Duke, you don't pay enough. But he did have some stints with Basie. But Johnny and Russell and Lou Barnett were all in the house band at the Flame Show Bar in Detroit. And the Flame Show Bar was the national room where people like Billy Eckstein and Billie Holiday would come through to sing without a band. And they would be the band that would back those artists. And so he played with all those. Then Louis Barnett joined the Sun Messengers. And so every night I got to stand next to Louis Barnett playing Body and Soul a la Coleman Hawkins. And Louis Barnett was in Todd Rhodes and his Toddlers. And had a national hit with Pot Liquor and Blues for the Bellboy. And he was deeply influential. He was Aretha Franklin's saxophonist of choice and traveled around the country for years and years and years with her traveling band. They would all get out of their plant jobs and take a 4-day weekend and grab a car or a Ford station wagon, and they'd go off all over the country. And Louis was really, really powerful. So I'd say, I could keep going on and on and on, but I would say definitely those 5 people: my father, Harry Langsford, Johnny Allen, Russell Green, and Lou Barnett. Those were definitely 5 of the most major musical influences in my life. Just hearing them talk about music, teaching music, and watching them experience playing music with them and learning the craft from them. That would be it. That would definitely be the top 5.
So what was one of the first live jazz shows you ever saw that made you think that's what you want to do with your life?
The first live jazz show I saw was the Buddy Rich Big Band. I was 16 years old. That I bought tickets to go to myself. My mother ran the famous Pontchartrain Hotel in Detroit back in the 70s, and they had an outdoor jazz concert series of national artists. So she would take me down to see those concerts, and that's where I saw the Buddy Rich Big Band. So I guess I dug that, when I was a little, 12, 13-year-old kid. The first record I ever bought with my own money was Buddy Rich album. But when things started to change and I got out of high school and I started going to see concerts, then everything changed. I would go to see Jay McShann with J.C. Hurd on drums, just piano and drums. And that was unbelievable. I'd go to see Griot Galaxy play at the Detroit Institute of Arts, and then I would go down and spend every jazz fest seeing every single concert that would happen. It just started in the late 70s, but we had a really rich concert scene in Detroit. To go and see Marcus Belgrave and see his music and how it would emerge as if it were Baroque music. It would just spin up and out in circular patterns across the whole hour-and-a-half performance. It was truly art at the very highest level. Griot Galaxy was on the cutting edge they were the Detroit center of the AACM out of Chicago, and so through that connection I started paying attention to Roscoe Mitchell and Lester Bowie and the Art Ensemble of Chicago, and the scene was very rich, and so seeing music like that, I was starting to see that a lot, go over to Baker's Keyboard Lounge and when I was old enough, 18, and see Curtis Fuller on trombone. All of these people were very impactful. As far as the first concert that totally knocked me out, God, there's been so many. I really can't put my finger on what that first one was. I would have to say it was probably one of those Detroit Institute of Arts concert series, when I was able to see something like Jay McShann or Lester Bowie or the Art Ensemble of Chicago. And my 20s were really filled up with seeing as much music as I could around Detroit, and the scene was amazing. We would, as a matter of fact, our band would, the guy who owned the club, the famous Cobb's Corner in the Cass Corridor, we'd do a big set. We had a house gig every week on Thursdays, and we'd do a big long set, hour and 15 minutes maybe, and then he'd let us take like an hour break, and we'd all pile down in our cars and drive down to the world stage. And the doorman would let us in because he knew we were just there for 25 minutes, and then we would see Ronald Shannon Jackson or the Carla Bley Big Band or King Sunny Ade. And then we'd go back and take that energy right back on the stage at Cobb's Corner and just completely blow the place apart because of our inspiration and our youthful energy. It was amazing. Those were very moving experiences to just play music, jump in the cars, drive a mile and a half down the street, go in the door and see the Carla Bley Big Band or King Sunny Ade, turn around backstage and go and just go crazy with music. It was they were heady times.
Yeah, without a doubt. When the music starts back up and we're done with this whole COVID-19 quarantine and we get back out, we see live music, what do you hope the audience realizes about this time? Or what do you hope they come in to do?
Well, I can tell you this, man. I'm going to pick up where I left off. My feelings about what I do as an artist is my first goal is to touch people and move people and bring joy into their lives and to remind them that life is full of beauty and full of joy. We just have to open up our hearts and open up our minds and our spirits to it. That's what this particular music that we love, jazz, was so much all about, because it was the opposite of suffering. People are out here suffering every day, even before COVID-19. everybody's got their personal sufferings, and life is a challenge, and people suffer every day, and that's the power of the arts, and particularly for me as a musical artist, the immediacy of music, because I feel that music is the fastest, quickest doorway to touching the spirit world. And so it's a way for me to open people up spiritually and remind them that life is beautiful, life needs to be appreciated and respected, and that the people around us to create the community of humanity need to share that experience. And I really believe that the way that I approach music touches people, and the only way I know that is because they constantly come up to me and reaffirm it to me. They tell me, what you do for me is beautiful. You make me feel happy, and you make me feel joy. And so my goal is to continually be authentic and honest and try to get into what the music really means for me and the musicians that we make it, and so that we can just remind people that there is much joy and grace, and that life is a gift. I hope that answer makes sense.
No, that's great, man. My final question to you is this: everyone has a perception of you, your family, your friends, your fans, but you live your life. Who do you think you are?
I am a man who's lived almost 6 decades now, and I'm trying to redirect a career in music to one that puts more pressure on me as an artist. You know, I've always been in large ensembles and been a part of a larger machine, very much like the Detroit thing, you know, the industrial nature, you know, and of a lot of people working together to create a product. And now my musical center is much smaller because I work mostly in a quartet and a quintet and a sextet situation. So there's a great deal more responsibility on me to become a better communicator, a better performing artist, to develop my ability to do the nuts and bolts of the business, you know, to be able to organize more success in my career and to create flow on stage and to continue to make new music and keep exploring what I want to do next. We have another recording project in the works right now, and I'm trying to organize how I want this record to unfold and what type of music that I want to be on it. And, you know, the largest group I play in is the Planet Dino Net, and that's a 9-piece ensemble. So that's like a territory band size, you know, 3 saxes, 2 trumpets, and a trombone and rhythm section. So as an artist, yeah, I just need to find the confidence and the courage at this later stage in my life to fight the good fight and keep pushing myself forward and accepting the fact that, you know, it's not too late. You know, I do feel that I'm late to the dance, but I'm still at the dance.
Yeah. Yes, you are. Yeah, so absolutely. No, yeah.
Well, thanks. So you like the CD?
Oh yeah, man, absolutely. Yeah. When I got this, I was totally into it, and I could just feel the soul coming out of it. It's wonderful, man. And I've always really enjoyed interviewing cats from Detroit, and I love getting new artists on the show, especially cats like you that have been around for a while. That just, you know, you got a lot to talk about. You got a lot up there. So thank you for taking some time out today, man. I appreciate it.
It's been a total pleasure. My pleasure.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Detroit, Kansas City, and spots all over the globe, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to T-Bone for his time, music, and stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit Neon Jazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.